I love Spider-Man. I love everything Spider-Man, and I've always wanted to make a Spider-Man thing, like a comic run or a TV show, but that's probably never gonna happen. So let's just pipe dream together and plan out a Spider-Man show. But wait, before we get into the video, I'm gonna have to ask you to like and subscribe. Only 0.8% of my viewers actually subscribe to the channel, and I will admit myself, that is pretty pathetic. But you know, if you subscribe, it would really just mean a lot to me. Keep me motivated, keep me wanting to make more videos like this. I got not a ton, but I got a lot of videos planned for the future. And, you know, more subscribers would just, you know, really motivate me to actually make them. But alas, back to the video. I'm gonna like segment this video into 3 categories: the setting, the lore, and then the actual show. Probably just the first season. If you want me to continue with more seasons, then let me know in the comments below. But anyways, let's get started. Okay, so for setting, obviously New York, like that's not even a question, but by setting I mean like where is Peter's life when the show is taking place, like high school, college, or his adult life. And when I tell you I am sick and tired of high school Peter, I mean it. I'm so done with the wacky high school antics where Peter is trying to learn his powers and he's inexperienced of all his villains need to go through the origins, blah blah blah. No, I'm sick and tired of that. Let's just move on with Peter. Now, in terms of what has never really been done before, his adult life would be the most unique, but my favorite era of Spider-Man is college. And if we do like 6 seasons, eventually we will move on to adult Peter, so we're going with college Peter, attending Empire State University for a degree in engineering, because that is just what makes the most sense to me for Peter Parker to go into. Do you know how useful an engineering degree would be to Spider-Man? Also, the year is 2023, because why not? I don't know. Now for my favorite part, lore. Peter Parker was bitten by the spider when he was 15. I'm sorry for this next part. I am Canadian, so you're gonna have to bear with me for a second. I don't really understand the whole American school system, which means he has been Spider-Man from the beginning of 10th grade to 12th grade and just turned 18. His birthday is August 10th, I found out, which means Peter has been Spider-Man for 3 years at this point. He's probably fought most of his iconic villains like Doc Ock, Electro, Rhino, Vulture, the gang, you know. The notable exceptions are going to be Green Goblin, any symbiote, and Kraven. Because to me, Kraven could probably beat an inexperienced Spider-Man, but not a more mature one, or at least be equals, you know. Peter Parker dated Mary Jane in high school, and they were next door neighbors, but they broke up since Mary Jane wanted to study abroad. Harry and Peter were friends when they were kids. One day, Harry saw Peter playing at a park and asked the limo driver to stop, and they played together and became friends. Harry and Peter would play together about every weekend, but one day Harry just stopped showing up. Peter's only friend other than Mary Jane in high school was Johnny Storm of Fantastic Four fame, and eventually Flash Thompson, after their bio teacher forced them to be lab partners every time they did a lab in grade 11. Johnny got his powers in their senior year, but Johnny made sure to stay in touch with Peter despite not knowing he was Spider-Man. Peter also had a cousin he would see every now and again named Eddie Brock. Peter and Eddie's mothers were sisters. Eddie and his foster parents would come to see Peter and his uncle and aunt whenever they passed through Queens. Eddie is 4 years older than Peter and is currently working for Kirk Connors despite the lizard incident. Connors only became the lizard once and he crippled his wife. Ben Parker died when Peter was 15 years old, about 10 days after Peter got his powers from a Fisk-goon. Fisk is currently living abroad in South America after Peter exposed his kingpin operations during his senior year, but is still controlling the city through Hammerhead, who is acting as his stand-in. Gwen Stacy is attending ESU for a bachelor's degree in music. She is a very outgoing person who plays the drums. She has never met Peter, by the way. Harry Osborn is also attending ESU for a business degree, hoping one day to help his dad run the business and eventually take it over. Harry in the show is a very talented fella, but has like zero confidence. He's also pretty strong and plays for the football team with Flash, but his lack of confidence can get in his way. Flash Thompson is attending ESU, but really just to be their star quarterback. The classes he takes doesn't really matter. They matter as much as he cares about them, which is like nothing. I'm sure there are more characters that are attending ESU that I could bring up right now, but I don't really need to, so I won't. The Avengers, Fantastic Four, and X-Men exist. Who's in the current roster? I don't know. I don't care. They might appear in some episodes, especially the Fantastic Four, probably the X-Men, Iron Man or Captain America might show up. I don't know. I'll decide that later. Also, it feels weird I have to say this, but COVID just wasn't a thing. Okay, now for the actual story and shit. Season 1, I want to introduce characters like Harry and Gwen, have Gwen get with Peter and hint at the Green Goblin. I want to show off this universe's version of the Sinister Six, have some lesser known villains, and have Brock become estranged with Peter, hinting at a Venom storyline later on. Also, I want to have a Fantastic Four and Spider-Man adventure where Johnny finds out that Peter is Spider-Man. Also, these are just rough ideas. They are prone to change, which doesn't matter to you, but it does to me. Episode 1, Peter gives a quick rundown of what happened in high school, helping the viewer understand what the universe is kind of like before he reveals that he's about to go to his dorm where he's meeting Aunt May, who has all of his stuff, and to meet his new roommate. But before he can, his spider sense goes off and he hears screaming below. Shocker just bursts out of a bank. Spidey drops below and starts to joke around with Shocker, not taking him too seriously, calling him like Herman and stuff instead of Shocker. Shocker jumps away and Peter chases him, dodging his blasts and other things that Shocker throws at him, showing us his Spidey skills and finesse. Eventually, Peter catches him and webs him up for the police. Peter exclaims that he's gonna be late, and we get a swinging montage of Peter swinging over to ESU. We cut to Aunt May, who is sitting in her car, looking very annoyed. Peter opens the door and tells her that he's sorry that he's late, and she tells him that she expected no less. They enter Peter's new dorm room holding all of Peter's stuff. Harry Osborn jumps out of his bed and awkwardly says hello. Peter introduces himself and tells him that he's his new roommate. Harry also introduces himself and Peter asks him if he remembers him from the park. At first, Harry looks confused, but as if a light turned on in his brain, Harry freaks out that he's been reunited with such an old friend. Harry then looks at the time and tells him that he's sorry that he has to leave, but he's gotta head to tryouts. At tryouts, we see Flash Thompson just be the best football player. Is it now a good time to say that I know nothing about football? I swear to God I play sports. But football is it's just a gap in my knowledge. Harry is also doing pretty well, but the coaches say that the kid's not very confident. But the other coach says that it should be easy to iron out, and that he has a lot of skills, so he makes the team. Peter's unpacking his things in his room and finds a picture of MJ that she left for him with a note telling him that she's going to France, and he stares at them for a second. But his police radar goes off, saying that a man in a big wheel is chasing a woman in Times Square. Big Wheel is screaming at this lady, saying that she can't divorce him and that he still loves her before Spider-Man jumps in front of him. Big Wheel stops and tells Spider-Man that he cannot stop him and that his big wheel is too technologically advanced. Spidey stands there unfazed and asks him if he's done. Big Wheel gets angry and shoots at him. They fight. I don't know, I'm not a fight choreographer, just they fight. I cry about it. Spider-Man webs up the big wheel and swings back to his dorm. There he finds Harry, who tells him about a welcoming party that some students are having and asks Peter if he wants to go. Peter accepts. At the party, Peter bumps into Gwen Stacy and the two start talking, but Flash comes over and exclaims to Gwen that Peter is taken and to leave him alone. Peter has to awkwardly tell him that he and MJ broke up right in front of Gwen. I don't know, this is just funny to me, leave me alone. Gwen awkwardly tries to fix the conversation but gives up. Before she leaves though, she exchanges numbers with Peter. Peter's very happy about this. Harry walks over and pats Peter on the shoulders and says that she's very cute, but to be careful since he's pretty sure that she's Captain Stacy's daughter. Peter gets a flashback to Captain Stacy yelling and belittling him after the Rhino rampage through a mall. Peter then says scary under his breath, but suddenly the room fills with fog. in the voice of Mysterio, asks that Harry Osborn needs to leave the building quietly or everyone will get hurt. Harry pushes a button in his coat and walks out with everyone staring at him. Peter leaves through a different exit unnoticed, except for Gwen Stacy, who was watching Peter the whole time. Harry steps into a back alley where Mysterio is waiting for him. Spider-Man watches from above. Mysterio says that he's gonna take his revenge on Harry because Norman is too hard to reach, and reaches for Harry, but Peter jumps in the way and tells Mysterio that he's the third villain that day. Mysterio vanishes. Out of nowhere, Harry and Spider-Man are put into an illusion. They journey through it together and find Mysterio just hiding behind a trash bin. Like 20 police officers then show up, asking Harry if he's okay. Spidey swings off and heads back to his dorm. Peter jokes about how chaotic college is gonna be if he fought 3 supervillains on the first day before the episode ends. Peter has trouble getting from class to class since he didn't plan his classes very well and they're all in different buildings. Gwen invites Peter to coffee but is a half an hour late after stopping a robbery. Gwen doesn't seem too upset and just said that it gave her more time to read. The two start to talk and bond. They get cut short when the Rhino throws a truck in their direction. Rhino is trying to collect some debt for Hammerhead. Peter tells Gwen to go hide and he'll call 911. In the spur of the moment, she agrees and Peter goes and beats the Rhino. Gwen then ends the date early and goes home. Peter, now realizing this was a date and that he had blown it by not staying with her, he heads back to his dorm and gets very upset, saying that he keeps doing stuff like this, but reminds himself that he has to or people will get hurt, and tells himself that he'll just have to try to fix things with MJ. He meant Gwen. Episode 3. Harry has his first big football match, and it's a big deal since Norman decided to show up. Peter is watching with Gwen, who doesn't seem too upset about Peter's disappearing, and says that her dad does it all the time, and that it's not a big deal. Peter is suspicious of Norman after his fight with Mysterio and the whole revenge thing, so after the game, Spider-Man follows Norman to his lab where he hears that Norman has been testing on humans for years. Spidey also sees a prototype glider and pumpkin bombs. Norman also exclaims that he wants to do some tests on Spider-Man tonight and to send out the Spider Slayers to catch him. Peter, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping, swims away since he's fought the Spider Slayers before and knows that they can track him. Spider-Man fights off the 4 upgraded Spider Slayers, but off in the distance, someone wearing a leather boot is watching. Peter returns to the lab, but no one is there. On top of some building, Peter starts to connect some dots. If Norman has been testing on people, then he could be the reason why there are so many supervillains. His spider also was from Oscorp, so things are starting to align. Episode 4. A big movie star, Bobby Carr, is coming to ESU for a meet and greet since he is an alumnus of ESU. Peter and Gwen go because Gwen is a huge fan and Peter is trying to get to know her better. Paper Doll is hiding in the shadows watching Bobby, but in her mind she imagines her and Bobby running away together and having paper babies in the mountains. Yeah, for those who don't know, Paper Doll is kind of like Flat Stanley but a villain. Anyways, Gwen and Peter reach the front of the line and Gwen gets a t-shirt with Bobby's face on it signed. Paper Doll yells, "How dare you have that shirt!" Peter's spider sense goes off and pulls Gwen down just moments before Paper Doll lunges at Gwen. Peter grabs Gwen's hand and makes a run for it out of the building. Peter tells her that he's gonna go in and make sure everyone got out. Gwen initially refuses but lets him go. When Peter runs into the building, she says, "Alright Peter, let's see if my theory about you is true," and leaves. Spider-Man fights Paper Doll while protecting Bobby Carr. Peter can't find Gwen after the fight and calls her. She said that she went home and hangs up. Peter goes out and stops a mugging and tells the muggers that he just can't seem to keep a relationship going while being Spider-Man. Peter swings back to his apartment, dorm, and climbs in through the window since Harry should still be at practice, only to find Gwen sitting on his bed. Peter tries to get out by deepening his voice and saying that, "Oh, he must be in the wrong room." But Gwen just tells Peter that he did a horrible job of hiding his secret and that she's surprised the whole world doesn't know. Peter starts to apologize, but Gwen cuts him off, asking why he keeps this from people in the first place. He tells her that if the whole world knew who he was, then his villains would kill and torture everyone he loves. So he tries to just keep it to himself. And that when people do find out, all they really do is worry about him. Gwen tells him that he's being stupid. Her dad goes out every night, and Gwen worries every time he leaves the house, but it's not like she loves him any less. She understands that he has to do what he does or people will get hurt. Peter's left speechless, and Gwen tells him that she really likes him, but they can't be together if he's gonna be keeping secrets from her. Peter tells her that this is really his only secret, and the two laugh and kiss. Alright, so before we get to episode 5, I feel like my choice here might upset some people. Having Gwen Stacy find out his identity in episode 4, it just kind of makes sense. Like, Gwen isn't stupid. The 4 times they hang out, Spider-Man appears right after Peter leaves. I don't know. That's my opinion. Doc Ock is in his lab tinkering with a machine. He claims that he will travel to another dimension and enslave the people to take over New York so that the city board will stop shutting down all of his experiments. He finishes his machine and warps away. Peter meets Johnny at the Statue of Liberty and asks Johnny why he called him there. Johnny tells him that Doc Ock has decided to do some dimension warping and was wondering if Spidey wanted to help. Peter claims that he has to study tonight, but Johnny reassures him that the dimension moves super slow compared to our world, so he'll be fine. Peter agrees to go. Before they go, they all get in this like pod thing so they can bring supplies with them to the other dimension, and it scans everyone and says their full legal name, and it scans Spider-Man and just reads out Peter Benjamin Parker to all the Fantastic Four, and Peter just sinks into his chair as Johnny freaks the fuck out. They go to this alternate dimension and have to fight the enslaved people as well as Doc Ock. They send Doc Ock home, freeing the people before returning home themselves. Peter heads back to his dorm and starts studying, but Gwen calls him. He tells her that he needs to study, and she says that she just wants to know what his day was like. He tells her that he went to an alternate dimension with the Fantastic Four, and she is very surprised, to say the least. Episode 6. Norman lets a drug addict into his lab for an experiment and shoots a bunch of drugs in him, transferring him into Freak. Freak starts to run wild in New York and is shot down by the police. Peter, Harry, and Flash are all hanging out at the mall together when they run into Johnny Storm. Flash runs up and gives him a hug, and Harry introduces himself. Johnny winks at Peter before they all walk off. Freak regenerates his body to have a more protective layer and goes out into the city again. Flash and Harry and Johnny try to force Peter to get his ear pierced at a Claire's. Peter refuses and is lucky since Freak storms into the mall. Johnny flames on and scorches Freak, but Freak gets back up with now orange fur. Johnny blasts it again, but to no avail. Peter swings up in suit to Johnny, and they try to take him down together, pushing him into a display case, cutting it up with glass. But it gets back up, now not being able to be cut. It starts to get shot up by the police and runs off. Peter goes over to the display case and finds its blood on the glass. Peter says that he knows someone who could help and swings off. Spidey arrives at Dr. Curtis Connor's lab where his cousin works and asks Connors if he can run some tests on it, and Connors agrees to since he wants to help as much as he can after the lizard incident. Spidey exchanges numbers with Connors so they can get in touch when Connor is done. In the meantime, Spidey goes to find Freak and hopefully keep it from causing more harm, but he finds Freak in the middle of a fight with the Hulk. Freak is going toe to toe, bar for bar with Hulk. Freak and Hulk have a crazy huge battle in the streets of New York while Spider-Man is keeping the pedestrians safe. Eventually, Connors calls back and tells Spidey that he has a serum to reverse what happened to Freak. Spidey swings to the lab and quickly grabs it, but when he gets back, the entire Avengers team, Iron Man, Captain America, Black Widow, Ant-Man, and more, are all fighting Freak. Spidey tells them that he has a way to stop Freak and they just need to get him to swallow the pill Connors gave him. They work together to get Ant-Man near Freak's mouth and get him to swallow the pill. Freak reverts back to being a normal person and the day is saved. Episode 7. I'm gonna keep this one short. I do not have a good idea what I want, but I want an Electro episode where girl Electro and boy Electro are fighting, and Spider-Man has to save them and stop them from fighting. Peter will miss an important exam because of this. Episode 8, Sandman episode. I want to adapt the storyline where Sandman kidnaps a girl and makes himself become like a castle for her to live in. I always really like that story and would love to do an episode with that. Just have Spider-Man for most of the episode try and fail to get the Spider-Man's Castle Island. Episode 9. The last 2 episodes have been kinda lazy, so this one's gonna be a longer explanation. This episode is going to be based in the present and in the past, both going over very similar events. So in the present, Peter and Gwen are having dinner at a restaurant. Peter looks across the street at a newly opened restaurant called Mickey's. Gwen makes a comment about how that place got attacked a couple years back and how they basically had to rebuild the entire building. Peter says that he remembers that. In the past, we see Peter and MJ at Mickey's before it was attacked. Peter tells MJ about a new villain that's shown up recently called the Vulture. MJ asks if that's 6 supervillains now, and Peter says, yep, Electro, Scorpion, Rhino, Sandman, Doc Ock, and now the Vulture. Suddenly, Peter and MJ hear screams. Peter gets suited up and heads outside to meet the Shocker, who is trying to escape from a bank robbery. He and Spidey get into a fight that results in Mickey's getting shot at by Shocker's gloves, causing a mini earthquake in the restaurant. The roof begins to cave in as we jump back to the present. Peter tells Gwen that he had a friend who was in the restaurant when it happened. Gwen asks if that friend is alright. Peter says yeah before they both hear, "The name's Boomerang, bitches!" The villain Boomerang is outside trying to rob Mickey's. Gwen gives him the nod to go and Spidey goes to confront Boomerang. During their fight, Boomerang tries to distract Spidey by throwing a bomberang at the restaurant Gwen is in. Peter screams no before lunging at the bomb. We cut back to the past and see Spidey trying to rescue people in Mickey's, but can't find MJ anywhere. He's screaming her name with no response. In the present, we see Peter do a similar thing, screaming for Gwen while saving people from the rubble. But he looks to his side and sees that the emergency exit is open. Outside, he finds Gwen helping 2 elderly people to the ground. Peter asks her if she helped them get out of the building, and she says that she did. Gwen's face distorts to MJ's face being rolled into an ambulance. Past Peter swings to the hospital. He tells himself that he's never gonna let anything like that happen again. He'll never let anyone he loves be put in danger again. Just then, he sees Shocker walking into an abandoned building. Spidey sneaks inside and sees Shocker counting up all the money. Spidey drops down right in front of Shocker and says no holding back this time, and unleashes his full strength on the Shocker. Shocker's jaw is shattered and he can only make noises. His mask gets soaked in his own blood and starts crawling away from Peter. Peter yells about how he almost killed the woman he loves and that he's not gonna let Shocker get away this time. As Peter then remembers the night his Uncle Ben died, how he chased the man who killed him and caused him to jump to his death. Past Peter turns away from Shocker and swings away. Current Peter is now laying in bed with Gwen at her place. She tells Pete to stop worrying about Boomerang and go to sleep and she'll help him track him down tomorrow. Peter jumps out of bed and says no, she won't be. Gwen is confused. Peter says, you aren't gonna help me. Not anymore, not ever again, we're done. Gwen asks what he means. I promised that I wouldn't let the people I love get hurt while I'm Spider-Man. This is the 3rd time that I let that happen. Gwen tells Peter that she wasn't hurt. But what if you were? What if I couldn't find you under all that rubble and your entire body was broken? What if you had to be taken away in the ambulance because some D-tier villain got the better of me? What if it was someone like Electro or Scorpion? You'd be dead. No, no more. I'm not putting you in danger again. Gwen is at a loss for words as Peter gets up and puts his suit on. He says goodbye and swings out of the window. In his head, he tells himself that this is 3 times now that he wasn't good enough to save the people he loves. If he was a better hero, then maybe he could have stopped those restaurants from blowing up and hurting all those people inside. Almost hurting Gwen, almost killing MJ. Episode 10. I'm going to retroactively put this as like the 2nd episode. I could go back and just put it there, but I low-key don't want to, so I'm putting it here. This is also an adaptation of the Peter vs. Peter storyline from Nick Spencer's run on Amazing Spider-Man. I'm reading through it right now and I really like this storyline in particular. Also, take a shot every time I say Spidey. Peter arrives at class and sees a familiar sight. The Isotope Genome Accelerator. The machine that gave the spider that bit Peter the radioactive stuff that turned him into Spider-Man. Peter remembers his science trip that gave him the bite. He asks the professor what it's doing here, and the professor tells him that he's got a grant to experiment with, making clones. Class begins, but before the teacher can start the lesson, Crossbones and Hornet break in through the window and grab the professor. They ask where the Isotope Genome Accelerator is, and the professor points right at it. They walk towards it, but Peter steps in the way. Peter begins to insult them and they throw him towards the isotope genome accelerator. Peter accidentally hits the switch and the room is filled with fog. Suddenly, Spider-Man emerges from the smoke and begins to fight Crossbones and Hornet. I said Crossbones. Suddenly, Spider-Man emerges from the smoke and begins to fight Crossbones and Hornet. Once the dust settles and the villains have run away, Spider-Man reaches his hands to help up a student. But that student is Peter Parker? The two meet up later that day on a rooftop and begin to talk. They realize that Peter has lost all of his powers and Spidey can't take off the mask. The two both see this as a blessing and decide to part ways. But this new Spider-Man is just reckless. Doesn't care about saving people all too much and is just trying to put on a show every fight. Just Peter seems to have lost all of his intelligence and is struggling to do a basic formula in class. Whenever he sees Spidey fight, he just has the urge to join in and try to save people, but without his powers he can't. One day, Peter's professor pulls him aside after class. He explains that they begun some testing to the isotope genome accelerator. They made a mouse go through a maze, cloned it, and made the clone go through the same maze. It was able to quickly make it through, but the original mouse seemed lost and confused when put in the maze. Then, 2 days later, both the mice were found dead. Peter begins to panic and meets Spider-Man on a rooftop. Peter begins to panic and meets Spidey on a rooftop. He tries to explain the situation, but Spidey just thinks that Peter wants his powers back. Peter brings up Ben's name while trying to convince him, but Spidey seems confused and asks Peter why he's talking about the instant rice brand before swinging away. Peter then calls on his old friend, Felicia Hardy, aka the Black Cat, to help him steal the isotope genome accelerator. He tells her to meet him on a rooftop when she's done. Spidey and Peter meet up on that rooftop and Peter tries to explain again, but Spidey tells Peter how he doesn't care about all this responsibility mumbo jumbo. Peter yells, "Now, cat!" and Felicia fires the isotope genome accelerator right at the two, but Spidey dodges out of the way. Spidey swings away, but Peter, using his old web shooters, sticks to Spidey's back and the two go swinging through the city, with Peter holding on for dear life. Suddenly, a missile comes flying towards the two, and with Peter on Spidey's back, he's not able to dodge in time, and the two get hit, sending Peter flying into the side of a building and then hitting the street. Spidey locates the missile from a building across the street and goes in, only to find Crossbones and Hornet. The three fight and Spidey is victorious. Spidey goes to Peter to see if he's okay, but Felicia's already there. She tells him that he's almost dead. Spidey asks where the isotope genome accelerator is, and Felicia points to where the fuck it is, I don't know. Spidey grabs Peter and swings over to it. Spidey tells Peter that he doesn't understand all this responsibility stuff, but he knows that he can't let himself die, and if this is the only way to do it, then so be it. Spidey zaps the two with the isotope genome accelerator, and they become one again. Spider-Man returns the isotope genome accelerator back to ESU and heads to the top of the Empire State Building. In his head, he says that it's been a while since he thought of Ben's words, and that it's interesting to see how Spider-Man, without a sense of responsibility, would act. Episode 11. Okay, now this is the two-parter finale, the Sinister Six. So Peter is in a bad place right now. Just broke up with Gwen, doesn't feel like he's good enough, and is extremely exhausted from all the So Peter is in a bad place right now. Just broke up with Gwen, doesn't feel like he's good enough, and is extremely exhausted from all the villains that have been showing up lately. Meanwhile, in an office in a tall-ass skyscraper, Hammerhead is sitting in his chair. He says that it's time that someone got rid of Spider-Man. Fist has been gone for too long and he needs to come back, but he can't come back as long as Spider-Man is around. He turns his chair around to show Electro, Francine Fryer, Scorpion, Rhino, Sandman, Doc Ock, and the Vulture all suited up and ready to face a spider. Johnny meets with Peter at the Statue of Liberty. Peter was telling him about all that had happened. Johnny tells him that can happen. Sometimes you're just down in the dumps. Trying to cheer Peter up, Johnny tells him about a rumor that Reed told him. Apparently when Reed went to Stark Tower last time, Tony was building Peter an Iron Man suit. Peter says that he has no interest in being the new Iron Man. Johnny tells him, no, it's like an Iron Spider suit, not an Iron Man suit. Peter says that he gets what he's saying and that he's interested in seeing the results before he swings off. In a warehouse somewhere, the Sinister Six is planning their assault on Spider-Man. Doc Ock makes a plan to use all their strength to take him down. Vulture will be in the air ready to chop at his webs, Rhino will be ready to charge at Spidey once he starts to fall to the ground, and Sandman will also charge in as well. And once Spidey is knocked to the ground, Doc Ock will grab his arms and legs with his arms. Then Scorpion will sting Spidey with a paralyzer and the Electro will electrocute him to death. Peter returns to his dorm and Harry is in front of their TV playing Call of Duty Latveria. He asks Peter if he wants to play and the two start playing. After some time, Harry pauses the game and turns to Peter and asks Peter if he's okay. Peter says yeah, why? Harry tells him that he's just been off the last couple of days. Peter says that he's fine. Harry asks Peter if he failed a test or something, and Peter says something like that. Harry then says, "Listen, Peter, I know how you feel. You know my dad is the great Norman Osborn, and being the heir to the Osborn throne, a lot was expected of me growing up, you know? Let's just say I didn't always meet what was expected of me. Sometimes I fell short, and my father definitely didn't just let that slide, I'll tell you that. I know that that's given me confidence problems. I've been to enough therapy sessions to learn that at least, and I've been trying to, fix it, I guess. Be better. So I know how it feels to fail and not be good enough. So just put your head up, you aren't the only one going through shit. You aren't alone." Peter sits there for a second thinking. He then gives Harry his thanks and Harry gets up saying that he's gotta catch a bus. They're headed to New Jersey for a game. Peter gets a notification on his phone. The Sinister Six is causing havoc in Times Square. Peter suits up and heads over there. Once he gets there, he doesn't immediately see any of them. His spider sense starts going crazy as Peter braces for a head-on attack, but it wasn't head-on. Vulture was going for his webs. Peter begins to plummet, but goes to shoot a web to save himself, which is also cut by the Vulture, shooting out a feather-like projectile. Peter falls to the ground, but isn't even given a second to think as the Rhino and Sandman slam into him. Peter screams from the pain, and Doc Ock grabs his arms and holds him to the ground. Peter's spider sense goes off, and he can see Scorpion's tail coming right for him. Peter screams no before using all of his strength to break out of Doc Ock's hold and jump away. Electro starts shooting at him, so he goes to swing away, but the Vulture cuts his webs and the Rhino hits him to the ground. Doc Ock's arms can't hold him any longer since Peter broke them, so he's able to get up quickly this time to dodge Scorpion's stinger and Electro's blast. As the villains start to rush him, Peter can only think one thing: I can't do this. He repeats this in his head over and over and over, and his breathing begins to get heavy. That's when he spots a manhole. His suit ripped up and his exposed body parts bleeding. Peter zips the manhole and gets into it. Doc Ock sends Electro after him. Electro sparks the water and Spidey jumps up to avoid getting zapped. Peter then throws a web bomb at Electro, which holds her long enough for Peter to escape. Peter heads back to his dorm and collapses in his bed. Peter starts to cry as he throws his mask into the trash. Peter passes out. Peter is woken up by a slam on his door. Peter quickly puts a robe on before answering the door. It's Gwen. She barges in and tells Peter that his room smells like a sewer. Peter begins to apologize, but Gwen cuts him off. "No, Peter, I don't care. What the hell are you doing? Your greatest enemies are out there in the city killing people and you're in here moping? What is happening, Peter? This isn't like you at all." "Listen, Gwen, I can't be Spider-Man anymore. I'm not, good enough." "Peter, you are good enough. You've always been good enough." "No, Gwen, I'm not. I couldn't beat them. I couldn't keep you or MJ safe. I couldn't keep Ben safe. If I can't save the people I love, if I can't stop those villains from hurting people, then what the hell is the point of me even putting on the mask?" "Peter, you aren't getting it. I'm still alive. MJ, I believe, is still alive. You stopped all those villains before from hurting people you love, so what's stopping you now? You know their strengths, you know their weaknesses. If you're the Peter I know, the Peter I fell in love with, then you wouldn't just sit here while they hurt more people. Some kid could be losing their Uncle Ben right now and you could have stopped it. Gwen, Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and this city needs Peter Parker more than ever right now. You're right, Gwen. I've stopped him before, I'll just have to do it again. Episode 12. This is the final episode of the season. Peter is swinging in his ripped up suit towards Stark Tower. News reports are going on about the rampaging villains. The news reporter says that the Fantastic Four and Avengers are off-world and the X-Men are out of the country, making Spider-Man New York's last hope. Peter arrives at Stark Tower and is greeted by Jarvis, like the human, not the AI. Peter asks if Stark really was working on a suit for him. Jarvis takes a look at him and says that it looks like he needs it, but it's not done yet. Peter says that he'll see what he can do and walks past Jarvis, who says, "Reminds me of the young master." While Peter is working on the suit, we can get flashes back to him and Gwen in his dorm making a plan. I can't beat them while they're all together, so I need to separate them. Like what I did when I got Electro into the sewer. Well, what if you somehow split them into two groups? So basically, you need to split them into groups of two and hopefully try to use their powers against each other, like getting the Rhino to jump into Electro's blast. Yeah, I hate this dialogue. Yeah, good idea, Gwen. Peter swings. Yeah, good idea, Gwen. Peter finishes this Iron Spider suit and we get a suit-up scene like from Iron Man 1. Peter returns to Times Square to find the other Sinister Six still there causing havoc. Like before, Peter jumps into the manhole. Doc Ock decides to give Electro another shot and lets her follow Spidey again, but this time with Scorpion at her side. Peter stands there unfazed as Electro tries to electrocute the water. Scorpion tries to pierce Peter with his stinger, but Peter catches it and pulls Scorpion in. Peter slams Scorpion to the ground and rips his stinger off. Electro shoots at Peter, but he dodges, allowing all the force of the shot to hit Scorpion, knocking him out. Peter flips over to Electro and goes to kick her, but misses. The two go back and forth for a bit before Peter's able to take her out. Peter sends a hollow drone up to make a hologram of himself running away. Doc Ock sends Rhino and Vulture after it. Peter sneaks up and goes to a fire hydrant, cracks it open, and points it towards Sandman, dousing him in water and making him essentially useless, as he's too heavy for himself. Spidey and Doc have a one-on-one fight. Spidey puts his arm straight and his hands up to reveal a repulsor. Spidey says that he made a rule that he could only use it once and shoots off all of Doc Ock's arms. Rhino and Vulture return. Peter goes to the skies to take on Vulture first, since Rhino really can't do much if he's in the air. Spidey takes Vulture down and returns to the ground to take on Rhino. Spidey does like an Iron Man 3 by sending all of his suit pieces onto Rhino. He turns the heat on max and gets Rhino to chase him. Eventually Rhino overheats and Peter suits up again. Peter returns to Stark Tower and turns the suit to Jarvis. Jarvis tells him that he can keep it, but Peter declines, saying that Iron Man is the one going around in an iron suit. I'm just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. But I might need it later, so don't trash it or anything. The rest of the episode will just be small interactions between Peter and his supporting cast, like Aunt May, Felicia Hardy, Johnny Storm, Flash Thompson, and Harry Osborn. We cut to Oscorp. Donald Melkin, Norman's assistant, is telling Norman that they haven't even started human trials. It's far too dangerous for him to do. Norman tells him that he's sick of giving idiots powers and that if he wants something done, he might as well just do it himself. He turns to Melkin and tells him to inject him with the super soldier serum and smiles towards the camera. His smile fades into Gwen's as she and Peter are swinging across the city. They stop on a building top and joke about how crazy things have been lately before Peter looks onto the horizon and says hopefully things will settle down soon. Peter's phone rings. It's Aunt May, and she tells him that MJ is coming to town to visit. Peter says, "What?" But like more loudly. I just don't have the voice to do that right now. Birds fly away. The episode ends. Alrighty, so now we are done. First, I want to talk about some successes and some failures. Personally, I really like Peter's arc in this season, doubting himself after he feels like he failed, only to bring it back and save the day. I feel like I did a pretty good job bringing in lesser known villains and storylines, and of course, I'm actually happy that I finished. I don't think I wrote Gwen all too well though. I kind of had the idea of Gwen being more active than MJ would have been, and that's really all the personality traits I had for Gwen in mind. The supporting cast could have been used more, and I absolutely failed at getting Brock and Peter estranged. Also, my reason for Peter not keeping the Iron Spider suit is kind of dumb, but I also didn't want to write an Iron Spider show, so I knew I had to get rid of it. But I wanted to keep it in anyways. It was a whole thing. Now the future of this project, I guess, is kind of up in the air. I'm not opposed to doing another season, especially if this video pops off, but if it flops, it might take me a while to write it, if, like at all. But if you have any like complaints or plot holes or something, leave them down below, or if you have any suggestions for season 2, leave them down below as well. Also, make sure to hit that like and subscribe if you want to see season 2. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.